Cost to put out the bid is under the $15,000 or $20,000 maximums that we have as administration. We're not spending so much for the council. If that amount is under, if the cost of that is under those amounts, we can go ahead and do that. Whatever research we need, whatever process we have in the title searches and all those things we're talking about doing. If we can do all that and keep it under the threshold that it takes to not have to go to council, we can do that research, put it out to bid, gather that information, and then come back to council with the contract and ask them to approve. So it basically allows us to bypass this step as a council action. In the past, we've always went to council and said, give us the ability to go out to bid and enter a contract. So it's two steps. But that allowed the approval of council to allow us to go out to bid covered us in case the cost was going to be more than the threshold. So in this case, we'll go through with it, and if the threshold amount ends up becoming an issue, we'll come back and ask us to ask council to give us more, for that process. If we can do it for under the threshold, then we can go ahead and move forward and get those information. So initially, the ordinance basically had to enter into, or put out the bid and enter a contract, and we were going to amend it to pull out the enter the contract part. Well, that's the part that you really need council approval for. So when we realized that we really don't need council to take the next step, we can move forward without that. So this just allows us to move forward in the process, do the bids, do the research, and determine what properties we have value on. And those properties that we feel that would be worth moving forward, we'll bring those contracts to council in the future.
Would you bring them as one package or individually?
Probably, well, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what's there. I mean, it may be a situation where you've got just a couple, or maybe a situation where you got 3 or 4 major ones, or one major and a bunch of smalls. So we'll wait and see what that amounts to, and then we'll determine what we bring to council. We may get the proposals back and not like any of them and not bring any to council.
Right.
But as I think I mentioned that to you before, if there's no real value there, or if it's in an area where there's great value but it's right over an aquifer, we're not bringing that to council anyway. So our first and foremost priority is to protect our water source, or sources, I should say. But we do have property that doesn't conflict with where our water sources are, and if those properties have value, then those are the things we may be bringing down to council.
Do you know that Canton owns the mineral rights? Is that still a question or not?
Well, some property we have contracts on from the 80s, and we're not quite sure if it includes deep mineral rights or not, although we speculate that those contracts we may have already given up the mineral rights to those properties, and if the folks want to frack on it, we may not be able to stop them because they own the mineral rights. So I think part of the process, I think we want to know those things. And so, although we can speculate from old contracts, I think it'd be nice to have somebody review those and tell us exactly what can happen or not happen on our properties. Because while we're sitting here and having a debate on whether we should or shouldn't, it may be mute on many of these properties that they can whether we want to or not. So I think it'd be nice for the public to know that as well. Contracts negotiated from the 80s may have already given up our rights. In addition to that, some of these properties are city-owned, which would be general fund. Some are owned by the water department or the water reclamation department. So even if we do these things, it may not help the general fund. So we need to get all that information together. And so with the actions or the recommendations of council, we can move forward on that anyway. So we don't need them to vote to tell us to move forward.
Was your read on the ordinances originally presented that it was going to go down to defeat?
That it was going to what?
Go down to defeat? No,
the way it was presented was written up as allowing them for them allowing us to go to put out the bid and enter into a contract, but there was no information available in reference to what property, how much it was worth, where it was located. So entering the contract when you had no information was kind of a scary position for everybody. When I saw the way that the ordinance was drafted, I was the one who actually brought it to them and say, hey, the best bet would be to just pull off the contract portion, let us do the first half, and then bring down specifics to you. And council absolutely agreed with that, but then we realized if you do that, we don't need council for the first half of it. Unless my costs go over the 20,000 threshold, and then I'll have to come to council and ask for more money for the research.
So just to make it clear, it wasn't because you thought you were going to lose on the ordinance?
No, it's because we don't need to take this step. And what they want, and I agree with it, what they want is they want facts and details. And they didn't want to be blindly letting the administration do what we wanted, because although we would be responsible, it would give us free rein to do anything and everything. So this allows council basically to have oversight and final say. which quite frankly, that's their responsibility as a legislative body. So this just basically clarifies the process is what it does.
Was that just an oversight, or do you know why that kind of slipped through the cracks?
No, I think what happened is when the original ordinance as written was really the intent, but we had no details. And I think that even at the last council session 2 weeks ago, Greg Hawk mentioned that if we pulled out the contract part, he didn't think we needed to actually go to council for the first half. And so it gave us time to go review it and check it out. And Dave Doherty confirmed that today from his end. We confirmed it from our end, and so it allowed us to basically take this step.
Any timeline, do you know? Do you have some consultants in mind, and do you think they'll fall within that? Is it 15,000 or 20,000? Do you know?
Yeah, I really don't know from a cost standpoint because I don't know to what I don't know the extensiveness of what needs to be done. I mean, it's easy to just say, here's a piece of property, put out to bid. But before we do that, we've got to do the research and maybe title searches, and also somebody to review the contracts. And you may need to get some oil and gas expert attorneys to do that. You know, we got a great law department, but they don't specialize in some of this stuff, so they may defer it to an expert attorney to have us review that on contracts that we have out there. And some of these contracts are quite old, so we have to figure out, you know, what they wrote 20 or 30 or 40 years ago compared to what the reality is today and the laws are today. So that allows us to basically go do our research and homework, and whatever we find, that's what we can bring back to council if we feel that there's real value and an opportunity to benefit from it.
You may need both a consultant and some specialty lawyers for this?
Well, I think the consultant could be a specialty lawyer, or you could have an attorney to review the contracts. You could have also an oil and gas attorney that would basically help us with getting information out to the bid process. There's a bidding process, and you have to make sure when we're doing this, we don't want to put a bid out that doesn't cover all the aspects and protect our city in the process. We want to make sure that we understand what we're asking for, and I'm not an oil and gas expert, nor is our law department, so we want an oil and gas attorney that's an expert in bidding out and drafting these contracts, so that we put out for bid, we've thought of everything, or more importantly, they've thought of everything for us because we don't know what everything is. So this allows us to basically take those steps. Now, as we go through this, and again, this is a evolving process. As we go through this, if we find that the research and the work that's involved is going to be more extensive and might be a $40,000, $50,000 cost to prepare this, then we'll have to come back to council and say, hey, we need more than the $20,000. We want to go ahead and have you do this so we can continue this process. And then they'll have to vote on that. But at this point in time, they don't have to vote unless that number is above it. And if it's two different projects, we could end up having. And again, we have to check with the law department. I may be able to have one consultant that deals with the research on our current contracts and the title search and stuff as one contract, and I could have a second company or a consultant or attorney dealing with the bidding process, and we could potentially go up to the minimum on either one of those separately. So it could be, you know, so there's ways you could do this that still keep you under the required law, what we're allowed to do without council approval. In any case, it allows us to move forward and get the information, get the specific lots, the details, the money, bids, and the distance from our aquifers, and then determine if we want to move forward on any of these. And if we do, then we'll bring it back to council and they can determine it based on those facts.
Are you still thinking in terms of $500,000 or better in revenue to Canton as the potential?
Well, you know, we talked about that. I think I had a conversation with that earlier. You know, that's a very conservative number. We got a document that the city of Carrollton or the village of Carrollton, what are they, city of village, whatever, Carrollton, whatever they are, they actually just received nearly $1 million, 930 some odd thousand on leasing just a couple hundred acres of their property. So we have substantially more property than that. However, if the property that I think we have the best opportunity on, the mineral rights have already gone, then there's $0. If another property we think is a good one ends up being, you know, at or near our water aquifer, we're going to scratch that. So until we see what the properties are, what the values are, and where they're located, we really don't know. And you know, I was being I thought very conservative on the dollar amount. That allows us to move forward and address it. My biggest concern here is this. As you know, and everybody else knows, we're talking about potentially raising taxes in the city of Canton. And we're talking about if we don't raise taxes and we don't generate revenues through these types of ordinance, we're talking about significant layoffs, and it's going to impact our safety forces. So the proposal that you have here, with this being one of those items on the proposal, is our alternative budget plan that says these are the things we could do in lieu of raising taxes or layoffs. And as council reviews these, they may allow some of them to happen, they may allow some of them not to happen. And once we get all these things from council, we determine what they allow and what the value is. And then what's left, we'll have a gap, and we have to figure out how to close that. And the question is, where do we go from there? Well, we can't raise taxes in November because we've missed our cutoff date. So that leaves either reducing employees by layoffs or finding some other alternative revenue generating or cost saving measure. And there's very few left because we've discussed as many as we could come up with in the last year. So basically that's what it is. And you know, as the administration for the city of Canton, I'm only allowed to spend the revenue that we have. So we either generate more revenue or we make reductions. And we're trying to close this gap, and this is the process. The good news is, here it is in July, we're addressing the issue now instead of next year when we're in the middle of it. So we got a chance to get ahead of the game, and whatever we do now is going to better position us for January.
Thank you.